like I'm rambling. Sarah, go on.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, hello. Hi everyone. Just like a little bit of a short intro. Thank you, Sara, first of all for the intro and for starting the call. And I'm really glad that we have this opportunity to even get to know each other as well as mentors. Why joining the program? Basically, the whole initiative from the first second that I've heard about it from get-go, it's something that I'm really glad to be part of. I'm really glad that it's happening in the world right now, that you have actually gathered these kind of wonderful minds who are working on these kind of solutions. On one side, I have a little bit of a personal quarrel with the C topic, so to say. So I'm really glad to be able to contribute anyway to the cause. And I'm just really happy to just get the opportunity to meet these wonderful minds. I mean, and to have direct conversations with them, to learn from them, and just be able to share, well, a few hints or tips how to improve what they do. So that's it from me. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Bernardo, how was your experience? Why did you start? What was the reason behind picking up mentoring?
Sure, thanks for inviting me as well. I'm really excited to be here. So yeah, I mean, I think oncology plays a big role in my life. I did a PhD in oncology and then moved to the sort of business end of things and worked in consulting. So that's a topic I've sort of spent many hours of my life studying. So and also it's really exciting to be surrounded by as Sara mentioned, you know, sort of bright minds and lots of innovation. It's a really nice break from a corporate job, I think, now, and sort of seeing a lot of new ideas. So yeah, I think those are sort of my motivations.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I completely agree. Like a break from the corporate world is definitely something that's refreshing. If you work in a huge machine, just to see in a startup, like things can like go so fast, and actually your maybe your idea or mentoring or just input can have quite a big influence in terms of what kind of direction the startup takes, or in the whole life cycle even. Thank you.
Exactly.
Great. How about you, Károly? What's your reason behind starting to and help us mentoring the startups?
My main purpose is just I really like to be part of kind of initiative what I really like and really think it's worth to support and supporting who are in needs in oncology, sufferers, new innovation are really the things what I really value very much. And it was really my pleasure to take part in this initiative.
Great, thank you. Hi, Robert. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry to be late. I had some technical problems.
No worries at all. We are just going around and talking about the reason behind why you started to mentor and why you are helping oncology startups. Do you want to go next? Maybe just to share your reason.
Sure. I mean, I've increasingly been focused on health tech and life sciences generally, not just oncology, simply because the quality of tech that I'm seeing in Europe is very high. And our financing markets for tech are very poor in this space. And therefore, I think anything that we can do to try to build more of a cross-European approach to both helping these companies and helping them get funding is good, not just for Europe, but also generally for the world. I mean, the fact, for example, that the leading COVID-19 a vaccine, which was talked about yesterday, is effectively coming out of Germany and could not really have been financed except with a partnership with Pfizer. both shows you the quality of the tech that we have and also the problems that we have in terms of actually providing adequate financing in the space.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, definitely, we are aiming to facilitate these, not just European wide, but yeah, hoping for more like a global collaboration. And as you said, the vaccine from Pfizer and the German company wouldn't have, become so quick and successful. It wasn't for international cooperation. Well, we didn't connect them, but maybe the next big breakthrough will come through you guys in cLAB. Johnny, do you want to go next? Hi.
Hi, sorry, I just joined because I didn't realize it had changed to Zoom, so I was waiting alone in the Google, in the Google.
Oh, sorry.
So I missed the question.
What's the reason behind mentoring? What is your why? Why did you have decided to start mentoring?
So, I mean, I'm participating as a mentor in different programs, and I think for this particular one, one of the reasons was to hear about the startups a bit more closely, because I'm also considering starting angel investment. So it's a good exercise to work a bit closer with the startups. Secondly, I'm setting up my own consulting firm, having left the banking world. And, for me, it's a good way to see what problems or difficulties that companies are facing, because obviously that can help me in defining what consulting services that I offer and how I package them as well. And thirdly, I think it's good practice from a leadership perspective as well to mentor. And lastly, I would say I've had mentors myself throughout my career. So it's also sort of karma thing, to give back what you achieve. And I think it's interesting with all this kind of, when you give free advice or you mentor or volunteering, I find that somehow it almost always leads to something else that benefits me directly, one way or another. So those would be my key reasons.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you say that you going into angel investment and you coming from the banking sector, you want to learn about the struggles, because there are so many investors coming from the financial industry have no idea the real struggles of a startup, and it is difficult for the entrepreneurs to explain and have a common ground with the investors and show them the real struggles they have. So it's really good that you make that you make the extra mile to learn about that.
Yeah, and I think also, like, when you are within a field, for me, I've been in a very sort of expert field, and only dealing with people that are also in that expert field, just like just like the startups have the sort of medical background. And I think at some point it becomes it's difficult to see also what I've achieved and where I've come, because I'm always sort of talking to others who are in the same field. But by talking to these startups, I'm already thinking about how I can, communicate my consulting services in a different way, because it's going to have to be at a more basic level than perhaps what I was thinking before. So, it's been really helpful in that sense.
Great, thank you. That makes sense. Eva, how about you?
Well, for me, the main reason was basically on an everyday basis, I work with startups. I hear their pitches like 20, 30 times a day. And whenever I see a new pitch deck or hear a new pitch, I always catch myself like, this is a great idea, it's amazing science, but the way you're communicating that science makes absolutely no sense. And having witnessed quite a few companies fail to actually raise necessary funding, and the only reason why they failed, not because they didn't have the great technology or science, they failed because simply those decks and those pitches were appalling. So my interest is basically to demystify the fundraising industry for those startups, and really coming from, you know, the proper investment background myself, and basically, you know, is essentially I am a type of person they'll be pitching in the end anyway. So I'd like to really help them get the message across as clearly as possible and get the necessary funding.
Great, thank you. Petar, how about you? Sorry for leaving you last.
No problem at all. First of all, it's a great pleasure, really an honor to be a part of this amazing group. I mean, I just like to agree with everyone, really. It's hard to say something new when you're lost, but I could definitely say that, you know, I've been mentoring in, well, now I mentor at over 30 different organizations, and I've been doing this for a very long time. And I find this as one of the crucial elements for any startup to scale, is to find the good mentors. But also for mentees, you know, for myself, I learned so much by mentoring others. And I think this gives me the greatest value. And especially when you have such great initiatives who's tackling the cancer is one of the, you know, biggest health problems we face as a humanity. So, you know, this is what I wanted to say. And it's really a privilege to work with you guys. So.
Thank you. Yeah, great. And thanks for everyone for the input. I think, yeah, we heard a lot of things that definitely resonates with why we also started this program. Forward going, I will just bring in questions. I will not call out names unless there is deep silence, but I don't expect that. So just feel free to jump in. I'm really curious to hear your opinion. So I put down a few questions in advance, and one of them was like, what is the role of a mentor? And I put a note to myself that I should add this when I ask this question, just to say, surprise me, because we heard a lot of things. What is the role of a mentor? Obviously, to help startups to grow, to question and have an external pair of eyes. But what do you think that is crucial? Maybe it could be something very timely that's actually today a good mentor is like that and that. What is the role of a mentor today?
Look, I think a key point for the mentor is actually, it's not our business. We're not the entrepreneur. And therefore, our objective really is to help the entrepreneurs ask the right questions and think about things that they may not be thinking about. And I think that requires a fair amount of humility from the standpoint of the mentors, that we do not, that we're not directional in the way that we give guidance. Obviously, we don't want people to violate the law, and there may be some things that they would do that we would just tell them that this is why I think that doesn't make sense. But I think it's a very even balance between trying to provide helpful guidance, but also having a certain amount of humility about one's own ability to provide that guidance, and the fact that the companies are getting, the founders are getting guidance from lots of different directions, and they're inconsistent, just to a great extent. And part of it is also helping them to understand that that's not a bad thing, that, you know, that they should be kind of taking all of that on board, and then making business decisions in the way that any senior executive would be, hopefully listening to a range of opinions and then reaching conclusions.
I'll add to this that the role of a mentor is essentially the same as being a psychotherapist, just with a more deeper industry knowledge and leading startup founders to take the right decisions wherever those are needed, but by not imposing your own opinion on it.
And I think it's a really, really good metaphor as a therapist, just to listen. And I also like what you say, that just to help them ask the right questions. It's not that you asking them the right questions, but then they come up with the right questions. I wonder if, as a mentor, is your role to also maybe to help them to develop certain skills, or is it maybe out of the scope of mentorship?
I think that mentorship is aimed at progress, right? Mentors are there to help people grow. And if when you're growing, you're always developing new skills. It's just sometimes you don't realize you're doing those, but essentially you are, by simply even taking that first step to actually engage in this conversation. That's what's already moving the whole boat forward. So I'd say, yes, definitely mentors are encouraging development of new skills. And I also think mentors are playing a crucial role with sometimes opening the eyes for entrepreneurs and actually finding what's the right skill to develop at a certain time.
Yes, actually, it's about the exchange. You know, when you're actually exchanging with the startup as while you're being a mentor, and on the other side, it's maybe not just that much about a certain niche or a skill that you can transfer or exchange with the startup, but also being there as a supporter, as maybe on one side even as an enabler or someone who can help them with, let's say, making their horizons a little bit wider and having access to a little bit, well, a different set of information, contacts, etc., etc.
Great. Is there anyone who'd like to add to that?
I'd just add that in my view, a mentor can give opinions, perhaps more so than if you think about business coach. Like I tend to sort of distinguish those type of roles. So if you have a business coach, that's someone who basically helps you make decisions on your own and they sort of structure your thoughts. I think a mentor to me is someone who also draws on, you know, their expertise and guides perhaps sometimes more directly than a coach would do. So I don't see anything wrong in sort of giving them guidance or opinions based on my experience. So for example, I mean, we were discussing financial spreads. So I can say, you know, in my experience, all banks do it this way and they expect to see spreads in a specific way. You don't have to do it that way, but you know, there is a reason why they're doing it. Whereas, you know, a coach would be more like, what are the different ways you could do this in? How would you look? It would be very like, you know, elaborate instead of giving the answer. So I think sometimes mentors perhaps a little bit more direct, I would say.
Yeah, I can see different mentoring styles shaping up within the group, but that's great because yeah, we are all different, and as long as you're not forcing them to break the law, it's all good to bring our own style and identity into mentoring. So moving on, maybe something more general. Now we're talking about the program itself and oncology startups. So what did you see? What was their biggest challenge? So you obviously work together one-to-one sessions with the startups. How do you see what is currently their biggest challenge that they have to come through or tackle?
The one that I saw, I don't know if I was paired together with someone because of my background, but definitely with regards to financial forecasting. Because the issue was a bit like, you know, when we started with the pitch deck and I asked questions and some of it couldn't really be backed up. And then you go back to where is this number coming from? Then you go back to the financial model. And once you start reviewing the financial model, you realize that there are errors in the financial model, or if not errors, at least not best practice. So it's sort of like, you know, I felt like maybe when we had the group sessions, it was very much focused on the pitch, which was the purpose. But when we're discussing sort of individual slides, to me, it's also, you know, whether the number on the page is in red or in blue or to the left or to the right, like at the end of the day, I feel the number needs to be correct or like, you know, as accurate as possible. And that comes back to forecasting and the assumptions behind it. So I felt that was lacking. And I mean, we saw some of the startups had, I mean, out of proportion sort of growth numbers and valuations. So that was definitely one thing that I felt could be improved.
Thank you. Anyone else?
In my case, it may simply have been that you matched this company with me for a particular purpose, because the company I was working with has real complex issues in terms of a need to restructure. And the challenge that they have is trying, or at least from my standpoint, the challenge that I tried to get them to recognize is how to restructure in a way that maintained as much optionality as possible, given that they don't know where their money is going to come from. And so we got into some fairly technical discussions of comparisons between companies and tax regimes in different jurisdictions and how they could structure in a way that potentially would work for different kinds of investor groups.
Mm-hmm. On a scale from like 1 to 10, I'm just out of curiosity, how much do you think you could, I'm not saying solve their problem as such, but how big of an impact you had? I mean, it was a really brief cooperation with the startups. You had 2 sessions, right? So if you just go quickly around just to say a number from 1 to 10, how big of an impact do you think you made?
I mean, I don't know about the number, because we're, for example, with my startup, we're still in the process of working. So we had our 2 sessions, we have our 3rd one, we have another one scheduled before the demo day. So we're still in the progress. That's why it's kind of hard to say that.
Nice. Okay, so you took on more sessions voluntarily. Very nice, thank you. But yeah, I guess
similar, very similar for me. Yeah, just still structuring things.
Mm-hmm. Do you think then forward going it would make sense to put on more sessions? Because we had now, we scheduled for 2, but do you think it would be reasonable to put in more sessions with the startups in the next year's program?
Well, it depends, to be honest. If startups going to have like mentors more specific to their need, for example, say, I don't know, like if it's only on one particular subject, say like in my case, it's not fundraising. In my case, like it's a little bit of everything. And that's why it takes like so much time. If they had, for example, like a multitude of mentors who were like all on, like everyone would be on a specific vertical, then 2 hours would be more than enough. But it's just because there's so much stuff to cover by one mentor, I think that's where it requires more time, basically.
Okay.
I've worked with a number of programs, and I think that the ones that work the best actually have 2 kinds of mentors. Mm-hmm. They have the kinds of mentors that may be the 1 hour a week mentors who are providing general guidance and business advice and getting into some of the issues, for example, that Johnny was talking about. And then there are other mentors who, and I would put myself more typically in the latter category, not always, which is providing help in specific areas, and therefore it makes sense for the companies to engage. I may, in many programs, engage with 5 or 6 companies out of the 10, but it's not the 1 hour a week, it's that they have a particular problem in an area that I'm focused in. And I think particularly in a technical space like you're in here, where there will be issues, for example, of regulation, reimbursement, go-to-market strategies, given the issues with kind of particularly the fragmentation of the European market, for example, et cetera. A whole variety of areas where I think companies can use specialized advice, and it would be great for them when they have the need to be able to call up somebody and have a call for an hour, but not necessarily feel like they need to continue to engage with that person on a 1 hour a week basis or whatever.
Thanks. I mean, it's a really good feedback to just divide it and have more general mentorship. And then that's maybe throughout the program from day 1, and then that mentor could advise on what specialists to bring in, if it should be around finances or should be around lower, and so on.
Yeah, I do agree that there are quite many different kind of mentorship, as we discussed so far, and the length of this mentoring really depends on which kind of mentoring you are doing. So if there is some skill development in the focus, definitely 2 sessions are not enough. If you want to coach your partner, 2 sessions not enough as well. If you just want to make a quick review on where they are, give some feedback from your expertise, what we did in my case, these 2 sessions are enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that it could have started a bit earlier because the formal launch of the mentoring session, so to speak, was quite late in the program. So, so as you know, like I was at the kickoff, and then there was sort of no involvement from my side, and I was sort of almost like reaching out to people, like, because I had the time to do it, and then the actual mentoring sessions only happened now in the last couple of weeks, and there was also there was not much time in between the sessions. Mm-hmm. So in my case, like, we went over the financial model and then asked him to look into certain things. So it was quite like stressful for them to have time to actually make the changes before the second session. Normally I would expect sort of 4 to 6 weeks probably in between between 2 mentoring sessions. So I would suggest starting it earlier, like right away. And then you could probably fit in, 3-4 sessions at least, and a bit more time in between. So that's what I would say. In terms of your question, I'd probably give it a 9 in terms of identifying the issue. I definitely feel like that has come across and they understood what they need to work on. But solving it's not going to be solved in 2 hours. It's sort of a full-time project for 2 weeks for someone who's an expert in it to actually sit and go through everything. So.
Yeah. Great. I mean, it's a good point to start earlier, and then you have more continuous involvement in the life of the startup throughout the program. So, and in terms of the teams that you got, how did you feel? Was there a good match? Because we did some magic, or Sara did some magic in the background to try to matchmake you with the right teams. How do you feel about that? Do you think it was a good chemistry? Do you feel like you could have them because they had the exact problem that you could have them in?
Yeah, for me at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me too.
In my case, they had a really long list of problems, loads of problems. So we kind of tried to narrow down in terms of which was sort of identifying which stage of drug developments to focus on, and sort of, yeah. It's still ongoing though, yeah.
How many sessions did you have, Bernardo, with them?
We had 1 session, but we've been doing email exchange, and yeah. I'm okay to continue the interaction though. It's fine for me.
Yeah, sometimes it's more helpful when they just have like a quick question, or you send a template or a model to consider, and then you do it via email, and then you have a longer discussion, then you schedule a call for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in my case, the matching in terms of the area of expertise were perfect. However, I had to realize that my startup thinking about globally, and I have experience and knowledge very locally. It really create a very strange situation, kind of uncomfortable situation to me, but that's life. I learned a lot, at least.
No, I think it's good to like acknowledge like what is it that you're good at and what is it that you may be not the perfect match. So in that case, I'm thinking, because obviously we have quite a big mentor pool, would it make sense to refer one of the mentors? I don't know how much you got the chance to get to know each other, but that maybe you could talk to them. Oh, maybe you should talk to this person instead, who's also a mentor at cLAB.
Well, I did that. I actually referred somebody to Robert. I don't know if they reached out to you, but I did that.
Great.
I don't think so, actually. But thanks for the referral.
Okay, well, that would be the goal. Like, obviously, we just started out, but the idea would be that if you know each other, and then you can refer the teams maybe, or even clients to each other, because the power of the network is not only to benefit the startups, but also our mentors, our experts, and the companies we work with. So this is only the beginning, but I think I could think of, and we can think of, something that could facilitate these knowledge sharing and just to learn about each other's expertise in the long run. So great. And also, most of you are sector agnostic, or at least not specializing in life sciences, with a few exceptions who are from the pharmaceuticals. Have you found it difficult to mentor a team about something you have no idea what they talk about? I mean, obviously, more or less you understand, but oncology is not an easy subject.
To me, actually, no, because I definitely don't have a specific knowledge in this industry, but I've covered a lot of different industries and credits where, you know, approving large loans. And the thing is, like, it's also interesting because the fundamentals are the same regardless of which industry. It's just like different weights on which factors are more important than others. So, and, you know, I think from asking questions to the mentees, it was also like it takes sort of 10 minutes to grasp what their issues are. Just like, can you explain to me how you came up with your market share that you're sizing? And it's sort of already there. It's sometimes falling to pieces, or, you know, it needs to be refined. So you don't need to understand the industry fully to see that. So I don't think that was an issue. I think maybe at the kickoff, I had some difficulty understanding what some of them actually were doing. But that in itself is a learning point for them as well, right? Because they need to be able to explain it. Even I would think even someone who is within life sciences, they're not going to be an expert in every single technology, right? So even then they need to explain it in terms that that people understand. And same thing, I mean, at some point they will be seeking, if they're successful, they're going to be seeking debt financing as well. And then they would be speaking to people like me in credit, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Look, I think that's an important point, frankly, in all technical spaces. Deep tech, a whole variety of things, which is, it's part of their job to figure out how to take what may be a complex subject and express it in a way that, for example, potential investors or potential customers can understand. That's a key skill. So I would agree with you. There's lots of things that we can bring to bear which are of a more general nature, because of the questions are frequently the same questions across verticals. But the key point, particularly with dealing with science focused founders, is getting them to communicate in a way that is understandable to people who don't have their expertise.
On the other hand, I think that there is another side of the coin as well. So my startup really was very interested in a product to sell in which there is no market at all. And you know, the whole oncology field based on the evidence-based principle, and there is no firm evidence behind this approach, what they are thinking about to sell. And on the other hand, there are a lot of regulation, how to register a product and how to sell a product. And in addition, the service itself is a very expensive one. So I, as a sector expert, just could help to think with them about this situation, how I would approach, and what I tried in my past practice in big pharma when I'm in the same situation, and I was in the same situation. And in this case, if you do not have any specifics, you can tell nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Then obviously, because I would assume, and also you mentioned that the motivation was also because of learning something from the startup. So I wonder, have you learned something maybe about, I'm not saying about cancer or treatment, but it can also be that, you know, you learn something about the biologics or engineering, anything. But have you learned anything from the mentees that you would want to highlight or share?
To me, it was not a learning, rather a feeling. It was really nice to feel the enthusiasm what my mentee had.
I do a lot of stuff in this space. I particularly enjoy it because I do learn all the time about technologies I would not otherwise know about or understand. So there is, I think there's a reciprocity in terms of the way that mentors and mentees work with each other. And certainly I feel that I get a lot of value out of the mentorship, and some of it relates to learning about things I wouldn't otherwise know about.
Yes, absolutely, for me too. It was a really both learning and feeling experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the enthusiasm of the startup was just so engaging, and it was just really amazing just to hear all about the whole process that they went through years before as well, and now what they are going through and where they are going to. So yes, it was very, very enriching.
Thank you. Great. Anyone else to add to that? It's weird, I can't see you. I mean, I should have get used to this by now, right? But it's just not the easiest thing when you're 10 people. But you're doing great, guys. You're making my job very easy, so thanks. Okay, then moving on to, I kind of find this question one of my favorite. So if you would have one thing that you say the team would need to be successful, what would that be? And you can't say money. So if you could think that they're lacking one thing, it's just one thing that would bring them to success and push them through the finish line. Could be a skill, an experience, a tool, or I don't know, knowing someone, knowing Richard Branson, I don't know. What would that be?
Failing a few times before.
Yeah, that's true. It's just for the statistics, right? Because if you failed a few times, then statistics says you can be successful next.
Is this in case of a specific startup we've mentored, or is it generally for all the startups?
I mean, I thought about your startup you mentored, but if you have something like outstanding that you think, oh, actually that startup would lack something, but if you want to say something general, that's also fine.
No, because like I'm thinking about the one I've mentored, I'd say actually a very enthusiastic team, right? And really know what they're doing. I think maybe a bit of lack of confidence because they've never really done it before. That's why they're questioning a lot the steps that they're taking. But generally, I think like what's really important for all the startups whenever they're embarking on this journey is actually integrity. Like really kind of, no matter what happens, you have to be honest and you have to really believe in this and take it forward. That's what it is. But also at the same time, you need not to be foolish and take a break when you realize that you've hit the wall and it just doesn't make sense. So, yeah.
That's interesting you say that. So do you think, because you all mentioned enthusiasm, so do you think enthusiasm could be an obstacle sometimes, a problem?
Sometimes, yes. I mean, not in this particular cohort, but to be honest, the amount of startups you meet and they really enthusiastic about the ideas they've got and they really try to push it and then they, say, yes, I'll be the one. And then you really like kind of read behind what they've actually got and you read through the ideas and you listen to it and you try to really understand. Maybe it's, maybe it's me who is not understanding it, but realistically, there is no product in it. There is no business in it. It's just like, I don't know, for example, they're either working on the wrong product or they're taking the wrong approach towards it. And then you realize it's just like they so much want to be entrepreneurs that they don't even care about the product they're actually working on. So that's where some of the issues really come.
Yeah, I can totally see that, all the confirmation bias is playing around then.
I find in the medtech space, quite frequently I'm seeing, and I do a lot of this with EIT Health and others, I'm seeing companies that have very good tech and tech expertise, but actually don't really have commercial or business expertise. And they don't have commercial or business expertise, which is focused on the health tech and life sciences business, because in that space, there are challenges for startups that go beyond those in other spaces, and they need to be addressed very early in terms of understanding. Frequently, at least there's some understanding of regulation, although not usually figuring out what evidence-based support they're going to need in different jurisdictions. I think they frequently have no real clue about reimbursement and how important, or health economics, how important that may be. They don't necessarily understand the whole issues of how the difficulties of getting in to the care pathway and the role of key opinion leaders and the need to basically be fostering all of that stuff at a very early stage. And as a result, you see a lot of tech which looks like impressive tech, but you worry that those companies are never going to go anywhere because they really haven't focused on the other stuff.
Yeah, I like your parallel to technology, and I'll say like with fintechs are having the same issue where they're very focused on products and the technology behind it, but perhaps not the commercial aspects of it. So, and commerciality would be probably the general thing that all the startups would need more of, which is the purpose of this program anyways. I think from my particular mentee, I mean, the easy answer would have been if they had a proper financial model. I think that would be a big step forwards. So they have a model, but it's not, you know, the issue with templates that circulate on a lot of entrepreneur sites is that they are generic, right? They need to be adapted. And in order to adapt it, you need to understand how it works. So that's what they would need.
In my particular case, the key issue was who is the customer, because in the pharmaceutical sector, it's a very tricky one. Patients benefits, but never pay, or very rarely. There are insurance companies, even private or state-owned. There are physicians who just mediate the therapy, prescribe something. It's really not easy to navigate in these settings, and who is new in this might lose the way. Yeah, and the value proposition is really key, because you have to formulate a different value proposition to all stakeholder groups. So what I felt in terms of my startup, this is the area where they can develop themselves, because they really did not differentiate so well these different kind of stakeholders with different kind of interests.
Absolutely, the commercial bits is always the difficult part. So that's why we tried to involve mostly commercial professionals who can help the guys. Sorry, Johnny, you were saying?
No, I was just going to add that. I mean, so the point around like the industry expertise, I think and this point around who's the customer, I mean, I saw the same issue with my startup, and I'm not an expert in the field, but you know, with general business background, like that is one of the questions. So are you targeting the hospitals, or who's paying for it at the end? Is it the hospital, or is it the patient, or is it the insurance company? And especially when you have some of these startups targeting, like, you know, 3 different European countries, the US, Asia, I mean, everyone knows that the systems are completely different, right? I think what I was trying to get at with when I was mentioning financial model, because I don't want to overemphasize that it's all about modeling, but what I was trying to get to them with was, you know, if you're not sure, then you can draw out scenarios, right? So this is what it would look like if we are targeting the hospitals directly. This is what it would look like if we're targeting the pharma companies. This is what it would look like. And I think they don't know who they should be targeting, because for some of these products, there are different business models, right? You could apply, and there could be different customers. But they don't know which one is the one because they haven't thought it through. And the financial aspect is, of course, one of several aspects to consider. But for me, it was sort of a starting point, at least to guide them in that sense. But I completely agree that they didn't have, and there was another startup which wasn't, you know, formally assigned to me, who contacted me also. And it was the same issue. What is the actual, what is the sort of business proposition here, and who are you targeting?
Yeah.
So to answer the question, Sarah, if there's one thing they need, it's a customer.
But it's the same as money almost. Yeah. Yeah, they need a customer, and then a well-defined business.
And understand who's paying the bill, which
Yeah.
is not necessarily the customer, or at least not necessarily the user.
Yeah, and exactly. And Robert, I think some of these startups also, they were, when it comes to data, so, you know, collecting data from the patient, it's sort of, I mean, the first thing that I thought of was Facebook, where they're saying, like, you know, are you the customer of Facebook, or are you the product of Facebook? So when you have patients who need to sort of provide their personal data in order to feed your AI system, like, shouldn't you be paying them for contributing that? Because for every new patient who uses your system, your product becomes more valuable, right? For someone else to pay for that product. Those sort of argument, you know, discussions also came up.
Great. Well, yeah, I think that's why, I mean, there might be brilliant scientists, but sometimes they need this help, and that's why it's good to, yeah, identify these things and try to help them with expert advice with you guys. Great. So we already talked about a few things, what would be different, but how the program could be better, because we are planning to do something similar for next year. So I would just like to pick your brain on what would you do differently? How do you think we could make it better? If you have any suggestions, feel free to rant now. Just, or it was all bad. Or if you would do anything better, what would that be?
I actually want to comment on the pre-demo day that we had last week, right? I think it's a great opportunity to hear the pitches firsthand and really, you know, help them shape them for the final day. However, I would have preferred if you could send out the decks at least a day before the pre-demo day. And the reason being, I understand that we need to kind of give feedback on the 3-minute pitch, which is perfectly fine with me, but to provide kind of feedback on the slide decks, which we ended up doing, and that's why it took so much time. It would have been much better if we got those decks beforehand, could have made, you know, some sort of notes to them saying this is what's not right, that's what's not right, rather than trying, you know, to say, can you come back to the page, can you show this again? And that's where lots of time, I think, was wasted. So I'd say, you know, if we could have access to them beforehand, that'd be amazing.
That's a really good point. Actually, we didn't expect you guys to be so like scrutinizing, and it was so helpful. So we got really good feedbacks from the startups, like, this was amazing. I mean, even though some people I was the verge of crying, some of the guys, but you did a really good job, like giving good feedback. So absolutely, I think for next time, just to get a more like thorough feedback on the deck itself, then we would populate the decks beforehand.
And just to pick up on Eva's point, I think actually if a mentor was working with each company on the deck, not just getting it the day before, but actually having some opportunity to comment on the deck and give them feedback, that the session that's the pre-session, we could be more focused not so much on what was in the deck, but actually pitching skills and how they could improve presentation.
Was there a session on the pitching skills throughout the whole mentoring bit? Not mentoring bit, throughout the whole program?
No, so we didn't focus on the pitching skills, no.
Because
so
like
could be an addition.
Yeah, because like one of the bigger things which we do, for example, with majority of our portfolio companies in biotech, right? We normally get them this communication training workshops, which in the case of a specific business, they normally are like 5-6 hours, which we can't afford here. But still, having even like, you know, an hour and a half like session about what are the best ways of communicating your science to the audiences, I think it would be amazing.
Oh, that's a really good point. Thank you. Definitely, because we are planning to extend the program a bit, and then this would be a really good addition. Thank you.
One thing
For the
that I would suggest as well is, you know, if you want to maybe distinguish yourself as well from other similar programs, I mean, I get that at the end of it, you have investors who want to invest. It's going to be equity investments.
Mhm.
But I feel that, you know, many of them were, the ones that I spoke to, they were only focused on equity. But equity is just one source of funding, right? And
Yeah.
particularly for this industry, it might not be the best funding source, especially not at the stage at which they are at the moment. So, you know, I think even starting the whole program with like looking at different sources of funding and expanding their horizons. Many of these startups, looking at their LinkedIn profiles, they're participating in these programs, pitching to different investors, but that might not be the best for them. Meanwhile, you have, you know, especially for the ones based in EU, you have so many different funding schemes going on, especially related to COVID, but also, you know, more generally health related, or those who are going from one country expanding into another. There are all sorts of schemes, right, with the EU Horizon program and other schemes. You have, you know, charities and foundations to seek grants from, government schemes, debt financing, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, there are different sources. I think that would be useful for them, both to have like sort of a general overview and potentially, you know, how do you actually seek these grants? I think that would be probably a good session as well to have.
Yeah, you're so right, and we realized that as well during the programs. It was, even though it was not part of the core program, we added 2 sessions. One with how to engage with angel investors with Petar Savic, who is the president of the European Business Angel Network, and then another session the same week on how to apply for a grant and how to write a successful grant. So that's absolutely crucial, and maybe just to bring it further, like at the beginning of the whole program, that first of all, just stop and think, is equity really the right investment type that you need? Because again, they're not business professionals, and maybe they just heard that they need equity and then they're looking for it without even thinking of other options. So that could be a good start to just educate them on, hey, there are other options as well.
And also, I mean, that also, in a sense, it also determines the rest of the program, because, you know, for this program, it's sort of like who wins the pitch, but that might not be the best for them, you know, because if you're going after a grant, it's not going to be a pitch deck. It's going to be like a formal application where you need to tick this box and that box. So it's a little bit of a different exercise in that case.
True. Yeah. Thank you. Great. Thank you very much, guys. I think it was a really good 1 hour. It's so useful for us to get your feedback, and I also hope that you got to pick each other's brain a bit, just to learn how the other fellow mentors felt about the program and what they get out of it. We planning to write a short post about this, if you're happy with that, just to some of the key takeaways from this, or we would mention you as well, just to post on some of our social media. Just a question from me, because we are planning to have more events where we would have panel discussions. Are you happy maybe that I could reach out to you just to bring you in as experts? Because we have really exciting topics coming up. It would be good to involve you in the future. And so what we have now ahead of us is the demo day, the demo day, so it's next week on Thursday. So very excited. I hope you are as well. We are a bit also nervous everything will turn out well, but I'm sure it will. So yeah, do you have any questions to me at all, or we good to crack on? Great. Well, thank you guys, and have a really good evening, and we keep in touch and see you next week then. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Take care.